Hello, everyone. It's Spirit House. Today I'll be reading The Message of the Divine Iliad by Walter Russell, and we'll continue on from the part 2, which is 10 lectures. Today is lecture number 8, titled Knowing versus Sensing. So I shall begin. I shall read to you from the Divine Iliad. Be thou no more with outer eyes alone, for thou hast knowing eyes to void the illusions of thy sensing. Throughout long eons, man has walked his earth with eyes of outer sensing, giving belief to that earth of his body sensing. Throughout his new eons, he must walk with eyes of inner seeing and know me in it as but visioning in it light of me and light of him. For I am a patient God. I patiently await awakening man. Awakening man is he who knows the light of me in him. Man may choose his own eons for his awakening, but know me he must. Until that day, man's agony of unknowing shall be man's alone. His knowing must be his own desiring. Wherefore be thou slave to thy sensing? Rise thou above thy sensing. Be me in thy knowing. We live in two universes, the universe of sensing and the universe of knowing. The universe of sensing is the visible, material, electric universe of motion with which we are familiar. The universe of knowing is the invisible universe that we cannot see. Let me rephrase that sentence. The universe of knowing is the invisible universe which we cannot sense. Man begins his existence upon this earth with sensing alone. He has no knowledge whatsoever when he begins. He lives entirely in the instinctive electric universe of sensing. The nerves of his body are what make him aware of his material existence. Sensation is what he feels with his body. He is electrically aware that he has a body. Electrical awareness of his body does not mean that he knows anything because of that awareness of his body. Sensing and knowing have no relation to each other. Sensing consists of vibrating waves of two lights of matter in motion. Knowing consists of one light of spirit, which is still. The one still light of knowing centers all motion, just as still fulcrum centers the moving lever. There is no motion in a fulcrum. All motion is in the moving lever, which extends from the fulcrum. Likewise, there is no power in the moving lever which extends from the fulcrum. The power which is manifested by the lever is in the fulcrum upon which the lever oscillates. Those who manifest God's knowing are moving levers which oscillate upon the still fulcrum of God's one light of knowing. They first manifest him through the senses as motion. They then become him through conscious knowing. Civilization progresses in cycles of unfoldment, just as all things in nature unfold in measured cyclic periods. The cycle of transition of men from one stage to the next is 9 years. Every 9 years of man's journey through life and death, he becomes transformed. Excuse me. The desires of his childhood, boyhood, youth, and manhood change as he acquires knowledge and experience because of having passed through those stages. The cycle of transformation of mankind as a whole is approximately 2,500 years. Civilization is forever in transit. Life is a journey from unawareness of anything but body to full awareness of mind in body. It is a journey from wholly sensing without knowing to wholly knowing without sensing. It is a long journey of many millions of years of just pure physical sensation of the body of man before spiritual consciousness begins to dawn upon him. Man has passed through those millions of years of jungle life of sensing and has recently emerged from that jungle into the dawn of conscious knowing. He has begun to know God in him, and for a few thousand of those many millions of years, he has been searching for that God of which he has been vaguely aware, quote unquote, through the hearing of inner whisperings within him, and through the teachings of messengers, whom God sends periodically for the purpose of nurturing that growing awareness. But our state of civilization is still very low. We are hardly far enough beyond the edge of the jungle to classify ourselves as other than barbarians. We surely cannot classify ourselves as godlike men when we still kill, rob, and exploit other men and nations. Mankind as a whole is still in its barbaric stage, but it is making strides towards rising above it. This coming cycle will be one more step toward his omniscience. We are deceiving ourselves into believing that we are a highly civilized and cultured people, possessed of great knowledge. Instead, we are in a period of transition in our unfoldment, which is between the animal of the jungle and inspired man who knows God in him. The fear of the jungle is still in man. He fears other nations of the world as tribes in the jungle fear other tribes. Nations maintain vast armies and navies for fear of other nations. We lock our doors and police our streets because of fear. The jungle man has no knowledge of good and evil. The jungle world killed for survival, for that was natural law. Man has begun to know the principle and necessity for unity, yet he still practices jungle methods in his human relations. He still believes that he must kill to settle his disputes with other men. He has not yet learned to turn the other cheek, quote unquote. In this present stage of seemingly high civilization, great nations are practicing this jungle principle of killing and building their empires with full knowledge of good and evil. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword, for that which man sows he must reap. 2,000 years ago, God sent messengers to give new comprehension to man. The idea of kindness and brotherly love was given to the primate world of that day, but man still refuses to practice it. Our comprehension of natural forces has increased so phenomenally, out of proportion to our spiritual advancement, that we are in danger of complete destruction of the human race. We are using new discoveries and skills to multiply our ability to kill for greed and power. Man's desire for material advancement has so far exceeded his desire for spiritual advancement that the tremendous unbalance between the two will destroy both unless the desire for spiritual awareness overcomes the unbalance between the two desires. During those eons in which man knew nothing, living wholly as instinctively controlled and electrically sensed animals, he created absolutely nothing, just as animals create nothing. The apparent creation of animals, such as the spider's web or the nest of a bird, are created by the one thinker, controlling his creations through instinct. The moment man became aware of God in him, he began to know. With knowledge, he began to create. He became co-creator with God, for there is but one creator. That was the first step in his transition from sensing to knowing. There is very little of knowing in that first step, and thus becoming aware of something higher in him, he began to observe effects with his senses, then to think of those effects, then to reason and form conclusions regarding what the evidence of his senses told him about those observed effects. Out of these observations, man developed skills. He reasoned how he might do things by combining the effects observed by him with other effects until his bodily skills in combining effects observed by his senses, supplemented by his thinking and reasoning, have brought him to the seemingly advanced stage of what he mistakenly thinks of as great knowledge. Knowledge has played a very small part in giving the world of today the inventions and products of this electric universe, such as radio, radar, and the chemical and metallurgic implements of our daily use, and the means of world transportation across seas of water and air. Knowledge cannot come through senses. The senses of the body cannot know anything. Knowledge is spiritual. It is cause. Man cannot know cause by observing sensed effects of cause. He can but be informed of those effects and photograph their images upon his brain. The brain of man is a part of his body. It is a mass of integrated electric waves in violent motion, censored by the still light of consciousness. Waves of motion cannot know. They can but feel. Our consciousness alone knows, and man has been unaware of his consciousness during all of these eons of his jungle days. As yet, he has but little knowledge and a vast amount of information. His senses have given him a great electrical awareness of effects of motion, but his just dawning consciousness has, as yet, given him but little spiritual awareness. Information gathered by the sensed eyes of the body by observation of matter in motion is known as empirical knowledge. Empirical knowledge acquired by the senses is subject to the countless illusions of motion which deceive the senses. For this reason, our so-called vast store of empirical knowledge is as unstable as the motion which caused it. Knowledge is a spiritual quality. It has no relation to the senses. The senses can observe and record, but they cannot know. They can be electrically aware of effect and can act through reasoning and thinking of the dawning conscious of awareness of man. Electric awareness is physical. It is the electric action of thinking one's knowledge into form, but thinking is not knowing. Thinking